there, I'm Jean Tiberio, and I'm a nutritionist and a wellness coach. Welcome to Healing Outside the Box. Today is episode 121, and I'm calling it, Is Food the New Political Football? Now I must apologize first because I'm dropping back and punting on this particular episode. I had an episode all prepared and written and recorded that was basically a review of a couple of food-related documentaries. These were lesser known, so I wanted to bring attention to them. However, like many things since November 8th of 2016, sometimes the best laid plans go awry. For example, back in the good old year of 2012, I purchased the domain name called iwannahelpthepresident.org. So if you are wondering who was brilliant enough to purchase the domain name I Want to Help the President, that would be me. On the home page, there was a beautiful picture of Barack Obama standing tall next to Hillary Clinton, and they were both gazing into the sunset, or the future, or some sort of an alien landing. However, now I'm trying to sell that website, and so far I haven't gotten a single nibble. Not even for $10. But that's not the only thing that went awry. After recording my episode this week, I managed to lose the audio recording. So I'm punting here and bringing up a subject that is near and dear to some of us, and that is Michelle Obama. And more specifically for me, her two programs that bring awareness about healthy eating to school children from all schools in every state. The first of her programs is called My Plate, and the second is the Let's Move program. You can find that on the web at www.letsmove.gov. I can also give you links to both of those in the show notes. So I'm punting here with an excerpt from a blog I wrote back in 2011 when I first started to talk about these programs. So here it is. Welcome to part 2 of I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Back in part 1, which I called the ABCs of finger foods for kids, I was ranting about the fact that our schools and our agricultural policies seem to be doing everything possible to make childhood obesity much worse than it could ever be without their help. I just discovered on June 2nd of 2011 that First Lady Michelle Obama unveiled a healthy food icon called My Plate. You can find out more by going to choosemyplate.gov. This was all part of a larger program to educate and promote healthy eating for both children and adults. She has taken on the problem of childhood obesity and diabetes and made it one of her highest priorities. Clearly, it's not a moment too soon to focus on the healthy eating habits of Americans, both big and small. I don't believe that story even made it to the evening news that day. J-Lo must have been doing something that was newsworthy. In the event that you're a real youngin', J-Lo means Jennifer Lopez, or Jennifer Lawrence, or Jennifer La-di-da, it doesn't matter. Michelle Obama, despite her efforts, barely made a splash or even a ripple with that initiative. It's almost like the healthy minds and bodies of our children are not that important, and yet we all know that that's not the case. Looking back, and this is me talking to myself now, we now know that Michelle Obama made more of a splash with her letsmove.org initiative and the permanent, we hope, vegetable garden on the south lawn of the White House. Michelle and her staff cemented the arch to the garden into the foundation in a sort of Alice in Wonderland architectural style. For the letsmove.gov initiative, she brought in chefs from all over the country. She then gave speeches in schools throughout all the 50 states about the importance of eating healthy, to both reduce the incidence of diabetes and improve our sense of well-being. For someone like myself, who in junior high school was called two&nbsp, and who is now 61, I've taken a few laps around the nutrition field since I was around 20, and these words, type 2 diabetes in children, stick in my throat. It just did not exist 40 years ago. Now, first ladies in the White House often take on an issue that may seem challenging, but this is very important to everyone's children. It's important to their bodies and their brains, and in my opinion, she is an amazing woman for taking it on. Now, the next excerpt from a blog I wrote back in 2011 is about the healthcare bill. I want to discuss President Obama's healthcare bill. Now, I'm sure it's not news to anyone that we waste billions of dollars treating chronic illnesses rather than preventing them in the first place. To that end, the President's healthcare plan includes some of the following provisions. Number 1, starting in 2011, small employers will receive federal grants to start wellness programs. The grants will be available for up to 5 years. Number 2, a new National Prevention, Health Promotion, and Public Health Council will be formed to develop a national health improvement strategy. Number 3, chain restaurants and vending machines that sell any type of food must disclose nutrition information. This will definitely help them clean up their act. Starting in 2014, Number 1, employers will be able to offer employees who participate in wellness programs up to a 50% discount on the cost of their insurance coverage. Number 2, a 10-state pilot program will allow participating states to test the efficacy of offering similar incentives to lower an individual's health insurance premium. That was written back in 2011, to be executed in 2014. Now, doesn't this sound like common sense to you? I didn't notice anything in there that calls for sending death squads after your grandmother. I suggest that we should all put our heads together and text, email, tweet, or call our congressman, senator, president, dog catcher with our input on improvements that can be made to the healthcare bill. So let's think outside the box, folks. Okay, so this is now an excerpt from a blog that I wrote in 2012. I found a story about Rick Perry. Remember him? Rick Perry was the one that, when he was running for president, he said that he wanted to get rid of 3 departments. The first department was the people that remind you to paint over the N-word on a rock outside of your ranch department. The second department is the people that advise you not to wear a pink jumpsuit on Dancing with the Stars if you don't want people to assume you're gay department. And the third department is, well, I can't quite remember. So this is a story about the good, the bad, and the yummy. Last week I was half listening to the news when presidential candidate and governor of Texas at the time, Rick Perry, was talking, and he mentioned the words, "We need to put more boots on the ground." Now, I assumed that he meant military boots and not Uggs, which only hurt our sense of style. Not great, but still okay. So I started paying attention, and it took me a while to realize what he was talking about. He was talking about the use of more security and possibly more violence to keep Mexicans from crossing the border into Texas. Note to podcast listeners, this was written in 2012. Okay, so this prompted me to look into Mexican history in general, and Rick Perry's history in particular. On September 15, 1810, Mexico became an independent country. Starting in 1844, the United States began a 2-year battle for the annexation of the territory that we now call Texas. This was a controversial move at the time because the northern states feared that it would naturally become a slave state and strengthened the political clout of the slave states. Another slave state meant more electoral votes from the slave states and more power to men who believed that slavery was just a fine and dandy thing to do to another human being. The northern states also feared that it would create a war with Mexico, which is exactly what happened. On June 4th, the President of Mexico issued a proclamation declaring the right of Mexico to the territory that is now called Texas. So the war with Mexico was on. The following year, Mexico lost, and Texas became a slave state. Governor Rick Perry was born James Richard Perry on March 4th, 1950, in the town of Paint Creek. This area of Texas was in the battleground that Mexico declared to be their territory. If the United States had not won the war against Mexico, then Rick Perry would be, dare I say it, a Mexican. This puts a new perspective on border control, improves my earlier point that we should all get along for heaven's sake. Maybe that wasn't my earlier point, but it should have been. So let's all make an effort to get along. Otherwise, we should just escort Mr. Rick Perry to the border with one of our delicious tacos with mole poblano sauce. Note to podcast listeners, I'll give you a link to the recipe in the show notes. Here is an excerpt from the ABCs of Finger Foods for Kids. This blog was written in 2011. A few weeks ago, there was an article in a prestigious medical journal about the crisis in childhood obesity. The suggestion was made by a physician that severely obese children should be taken away from their parents and temporarily placed in foster care in order to change their eating habits. Well, this story pushed quite a few emotional buttons. After reading this article, I was so depressed that I wanted one of those cupcakes from the Cupcake Factory. Oh, just kidding, I think. Anyway, this is a complex issue with many points of view about the causes of obesity in children. I feel it's time that everyone get concerned about this issue and come together to focus on providing solutions to the problem. Jamie Oliver came across the pond and tried to find a solution to our terrible school lunch program and found that he was facing an uphill battle with U.S. politics and federal laws already in place. The USDA insisted that the kids eat foods with high fructose corn syrup because the subsidies had already gone to those farmers. Where Jamie Oliver tried this experiment, the superintendent of schools did not even allow him into the doors of the schools. Now, in my opinion, I personally take issue with the fact that the government never consults nutritionists or other health professionals when funding these subsidized food products. I'm not positive, but it probably goes for food stamps as well. At the time that I was working in a hospital, this is the late 80s, dietitians were the only health professionals not reimbursed by any insurance when roughly 2 floors were occupied by people with nutrition-related diseases or needed nutrition-related surgeries, either diabetic amputations or, as we called it in those days, stomach stapling. Now, religious leaders often tell us that change happens for the better when people are fed up with the status quo and are willing to make sacrifices. What I witnessed yesterday on TV with the women's marches in every city in our country made me feel proud. So let's hope we're there. Perhaps we could start a movement like the movement that Arlo Guthrie started in Ellis's restaurant, only pro-health rather than anti-war. Or we could just eat healthy foods and spread around the good karma. That's all I have for you today. Be well and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.